Everybody was amazed by it. Other countries were copying us. We got hit with COVID.
He had the largest tax cut in American history, $2 trillion. He raised a deficit larger than any president has in any one term.
He also said he inherited 9% inflation. No, he inherited almost no inflation, and it stayed that way for 14 months.
What we saw tonight is the president making a very clear contrast with Donald Trump on all of the issues that matter to the American people.
On November 5th, Americans will go to polls to elect their next president. The contest will feel familiar as the two main candidates are the same as in 2020. Joe Biden faced no viable competition for the Democratic nomination. His predecessor in office, Donald Trump, easily saw off a crowded field in the Republican primary. Both men are widely disliked. Mr. Biden's presidency has been defined by high inflation, big industrial policy bills, and turmoil abroad. Worries about his age continue to plague his campaign. Mr. Trump's supporters tried to overturn his election loss in 2020. He faces federal charges over his illegal participation in that scheme and has been convicted of a felony relating to his 2016 presidential campaign. The election will be more about choosing who Americans think is the less bad option than about who is more popular. The election forecast shows each man's chances of winning a second term in office. Joe Biden and Donald Trump met for the first of the two debates on 27th of June. Normally, the candidates hash out important issues or at least trade insults for 90 minutes. Instead, Mr. Trump spent his time telling outrageous falsehoods.
We had the greatest economy in the history of our country. We have never done so well. Everybody was amazed by it. Other countries were copying us. We got hit with COVID, and when we did, we spent the money necessary so we wouldn't end up in a Great Depression, the likes of which we had in 1929. By the time we finished, so we did a great job. We got a lot of credit for the economy, a lot of credit for the military, and no wars, and so many other things. Everything was rocking good. But the thing we never got the credit for, and we should have, is getting us out of that COVID mess. He created mandates that was a disaster for our country. But other than that, we had given them back a country where the stock market actually was higher than pre-COVID, and nobody thought that was even possible. The only jobs he created are for illegal immigrants and bounce-back jobs, a bounce-back from the COVID. He has not done a good job. He's done a poor job, and inflation's killing our country.
While Mr. Biden's catastrophic performance undermined his candidacy.
He rewarded the wealthy. He had the largest tax cut in American history, $2 trillion. He raised a deficit larger than any president has in any one term. He's the only president other than Herbert Hoover who's lost more jobs than he had when he began, since Herbert Hoover. The idea that he did something that was significant. And the military, you know, when he was president, they were still killing people in Afghanistan. He didn't do anything about that. When he was president, we were still found ourselves in a position where you had a notion that we were this safe country. The truth is, I'm the only president this century that doesn't have this decade, that doesn't have any troops dying anywhere in the world like he did.
It's not going to drive them higher. It's just going to cost countries that have been ripping us off for years, like China and many others, in all fairness to China. It's going to just force them to pay us a lot of money, reduce our deficit tremendously, and give us a lot of power for other things. But he made a statement. The only thing he was right about is I gave you the largest tax cut in history. I also gave you the largest regulation cut in history. That's why we had all the jobs. And the jobs went down, and then they bounced back, and he's taking credit for bounce back jobs. You can't do that. He also said he inherited 9% inflation. No, he inherited almost no inflation, and it stayed that way for 14 months, and then it blew up under his leadership because they spent money like a bunch of people that didn't know what they were doing, and they don't know what they were doing. It was probably the worst administration in history. There's never been. And as far as Afghanistan is concerned, I was getting out of Afghanistan, but we were getting out with dignity, with strength, with power. He got out. It was the most embarrassing day in the history of our country's life.
The New York Times editorial board has called on Joe Biden to drop out of 2024 presidential race after a disastrous debate performance against Donald Trump. Biden's poor performance sent leading Democrats into a panic on June 27, Thursday night, after the US president appeared shaky and at points struggled to finish sentences. It amplified fears about his age and fitness for the office that it had been hoped the debate would allay.
Look at what I was left when I became president. What Mr. Trump left me. We had an economy that was in free fall. The pandemic was so badly handled. Many people were dying. All he said was, it's not that serious. Just inject a little bleach into your arm. You'll be all right. The economy collapsed. There were no jobs. unemployment rate rose to 15%. It was terrible. And so what we had to do is try to put things back together again. And that's exactly what we began to do. We created 15,000 new jobs. We brought out the position where we have 800,000 new manufacturing jobs. But there's more to be done. There's more to be done. Working class people are still in trouble. I come from Scranton, Pennsylvania. I come of households where the kitchen table, if the things weren't able to be met during the month, it was a problem. Price of eggs, the price of gas, the price of housing, the price of a whole range of things. That's why I'm working so hard to make sure I deal with those problems. And we're going to make sure that we reduce the price of housing. We're going to make sure we build 2 million new units. We're going to make sure we cap rents so corporate greed can't take over. The combination, what I was left with in corporate greed, is the reason why we're in this problem right now. In addition to that, we're in a situation where if you take a look at all that was done in his administration, he didn't do much at all. By the time he left, things were in chaos, literally chaos. And so we put things back together. We created, I said, those jobs. We make sure we had a situation where we brought down the price of prescription drugs, which is a major issue for many people, to $15 for an insulin shot as opposed to $400. No senior has to pay more than $200 for any drug, all the drugs they conclude beginning next year. And the situation is and we're going to make that available to everybody, to all Americans. So we're working to bring down the price around the kitchen table, and that's what we're going to get done.
Shortly after the debate, senior Democrats, including Vice President Kamala Harris, acknowledged Biden's slow start but emphasized his strong finish, while others privately suggested he should step aside.
Listen, first of all, what we saw tonight is the president making a very clear contrast with Donald Trump on all of the issues that matter to the American people. Yes, there was a slow start, but it was a strong finish. And what became very clear through the course of the night is that Joe Biden is fighting on behalf of the American people on substance, on policy, on performance.
In a move that will add further pressure on the White House, the New York Times editorial board said in an opinion piece on Friday that the greatest public service Biden can now perform is to announce that he will not continue to run for re-election.